It's time now for the week that was. Let's take a look at the top stories that made headlines around the globe this week. And we're going to start in Benue State. Somber but confident and assertive, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu last Wednesday in Benue State vowed to convert last weekend's tragedy in the state, which claimed about 200 lives, into prosperity for the people. Tinubu, however, queried the police authorities for not having made any arrests since the killings, to show seriousness on the part of the government. The president also charged the Director General of the National Intelligence Agency, Mohammed, to work with his counterpart in the Department of State Service, Tosin Ajayi, in order to apprehend those behind the crime. Likewise, he ordered the Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, to flush out all the criminal elements fomenting trouble in the state and its environs without any further delay. Well, it seems after calls were made by many Nigerians for President Bola Tinubu to go to Benue State, he finally did. But it also seemed that the president had a lot of politicking to do while there. And I don't think this is just the president's fault, because before the president arrived, we saw the posters. But also when he got there, we saw the little banquet hall that was there where they had their meeting. The president did well by visiting the people in the hospital. But I, for one, was very disappointed with our president when he said that he did not visit Yelwata due to the bad roads and the rains. I think it shows a little bit a lack of empathy on the president's part there. But as we're heading towards 2027, it seems no matter what the event is, even if it's a sorrowful and mournful one, that we're going to see politics involved. And it also seems that our empathy of our political leaders is something we need to continue highlighting, because the images of the children who were made to line the streets while convoys drove past them and poured water all over them is an image that's going to stick with me for a very long time.
I totally agree with you, Adeswa. Yeah, it took something away from the old import of the good gesture of the president, that we saw a bit of politics, and that he also didn't get, to the very heart of the community, where the dastardly act, was perpetrated. And given the fact that it is now a major global issue, the Pope has been talking, lawmakers, from other countries are talking, people are worried, and it's also having a bit of a religious connotation. Christians are being killed and things like that. I appreciate the fact that the president, moved, but then maybe enough care should have been taken to avoid any semblance of politics around him going there. But I haven't gone there. I think that he should be commended for it. He should also be commended for looking directly at the Inspector General of Police and saying that I'm surprised, that no arrest has been made so far. And I looked at the composure of the Inspector General of Police, and I wasn't pleased with what I saw. I hope that with that charge from the president, everybody will sit up, not just to make arrests, but to ensure that what happened in Benue will not repeat itself. It is an important thing to do. It's beyond politics, and the blood that has been shed, there must be justice for them, and I think that should be the priority for all the service chiefs and all the people within the apparatuses of security that the president has given marching order to. Kachi, you have anything to add to?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this takes me, of course, this takes me back to when the security chief said we needed to build a wall, and we had that conversation. Now, for anyone who actually saw the graphic images and videos of what happened, in that town in Benue State, it was traumatic, to say the least. Now, the president went to visit the people in Benue State. Of course, we know that this trip was also, like Adeswa rightly said, there was a lot of politicizing of this event, looking forward to the year 2027 and the elections, right? But I think that in Nigeria, we need to understand that we do have a very serious security problem. And we need to, the only way we as Nigerians can begin to understand that truly our government understands how terrible the situation is if they stop acting as though they need to be treated as celebrities and realize that they are actually meant to serve the people. I mean, the trip to Benue State did not need to be such a festival or carnival with the children lining the streets, the red carpet procession and shaking of hands on the president's way back to the jet. It didn't need to be any of that. That traumatic incident that happened, of course, the president couldn't even make his way down to that particular community. But then even beyond Benue State, there are other parts of Nigeria that even security agents cannot make their way to. A couple of years ago, we all spoke about Akuzu during the NSAS protest. Whatever happened to the dastardly acts that happened there? Today, a lot of people in the East cannot go outside. Communities like Amici are completely sectioned off from even security personnel because of how dangerous it is. People can no longer travel by road because it is a norm. As a matter of fact, if you travel by road, people wonder if you are okay. That is the Nigeria we're living in now. So when we do things like, you know, the president visits Benue and shares his condole, it doesn't mean, for me, that's not the issue. That's not where we are at. We are past that situation. We are in a dire situation right now. And it's not going to stop. It is not. We cannot keep coming here and commending the government for extending their condolences. People are dying. And that's the fact. So I think moving forward to 2027, any conversation that is not targeted towards resolving the security problems in Nigeria is a conversation that need not be had at this time. But then again, we of course have to deal with the reality that when it comes to politics, it comes before anything else.
All right, Kachi.
So moving on to the next story on the week that was, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced on Thursday that it is finalizing arrangements for the emergency evacuation of Nigerian citizens stranded in Israel and Iran following the escalation of hostilities between both countries. In a statement, the ministry advised Nigerians in the affected countries to adhere to security protocols and contact their nearest Nigerian embassy or mission in Tel Aviv and Tehran for registration and further instructions. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs commended the diplomatic missions for their efforts in reaching out to Nigerian communities. It reaffirmed Nigeria's commitment to the safety and welfare of its citizens abroad and its collaboration with international partners for a timely and secure evacuation. Now, that is a good signal from our Ministry of Foreign Affairs there. Our people definitely need to be kept safe, particularly when they're in the diaspora, when they're abroad. But particularly now, Israel and Iran has entered a second week of heightened hostilities with missiles being launched into both countries. And President Donald Trump of the United States has said that he's giving 2 weeks before he decides what exactly America's entry is going to be into this essentially a war that we're seeing in the Middle East. And I think, the world is essentially waiting to see what Donald Trump will do. He is, as they say, the most powerful president in the world. And Donald Trump has, before entering office, he had stressed that he did not want war. He does not want conflicts, that he does not want American boots on the ground in any countries. And it seems, I think it's yet to be seen if we're going to see if Benjamin Netanyahu has forced Trump's hand, because it's been reported that they had a call when Donald Trump was in Camp David before Israel launched these strikes. And so America's involvement, the initial statement there from Marco Rubio was that America was not involved. However, America is Israel's biggest ally, and the world is waiting to see what will happen. But in the meantime, I hope the Nigerians who are in Israel and Iran are safe.
I think that's the most important thing at this point. Whether America decides to play the role that is meant to play as the global Robocop or global police is totally left to them. But what is important, and which is at the heart of this story, is the responsibility of the Nigerian government through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to ensure safety and evacuation, if necessary, of Nigerian citizens there. I think what the statement from them didn't speak to is the viral video from a Nigerian resident in Tehran, who went to the Nigerian embassy and claimed that he didn't meet anybody there, and that Nigerians in Iran in particular, were panicking, and that it would be necessary for the government to step in. I think that our response, therefore, should be swift and convincing. Maybe this is the time that ultimately, if it gets to it, we will probably see the need for an airline like Air Peace that has always come to the aid of the federal government, in matters like that. We saw what Air Peace did over time, with Ukraine and the Russia war, with so many other interventions that they have done. I hope that at this time that we have lawmakers running riots and trying to bring down a flag carrier. I hope that Air Peace will not be discouraged if it becomes necessary to call upon them to rescue Nigeria as they've always done. But beautiful intervention. Let's hope that they will walk the talk as far as rescuing Nigerians and protecting them, those in Israel, those in Iran, is concerned.
Of course, and I think just to sum up what both of you have said, it's very important. Communication is very important. So far there's been a lot of complaints, especially on social media, about very vague updates as to what the situation is. Also a specific timeline as to when this is going to happen. While it's completely commendable that this is even a conversation in the first place, I think it's important to know what is the timeline for this to happen first, and communication with the people as well. Just like we saw that video of the Nigerian embassy where the lady was basically complaining about not being able to get adequate information. And there's been several other videos like that on social media. I think it's important, two things, just communication as to the reality of the situation. Oftentimes when we see projects like this, we don't often hear about the challenges as well on the government side in carrying out this kind of assignments. It may not be the easiest thing, but again, communication is key. Of course, we know that there might be some logistical hurdles. Trying to get access across borders as well might be a challenge. We know that has also come up in a report with some Nigerians trying to cross over to Armenia. So communication is very important. Updates about the situation and a timeline as to when it's going to happen is key, so we don't just, this doesn't just become one of those incidents that happens and then at some point we stop talking about. Back to you guys in Lagos.
Absolutely, Kachi. All right, we move on. The national honors recently conferred on some Nigerians by President Bola Tinubu for their perceived roles in defending the June 12 mandate of the late Chief M.K. Abiola has been met by mixed reactions. This past week, Nobel laureate and Grand Commander of the Order of the Niger, Honoree Professor Wole Soyinka, hosted a fireside chat with select media houses to share his insights and reflections regarding the honors list and the occasion of June 12 in a wider sense. Vimbai Mutiriri Ekpeyong brings us more.
Professor Wole Soyinka expressed his solidarity with those who may have felt left out by the most recent national honors recognition.
There have been many, many grades of participants who not on a list like that. And I think we should accept the fact that it's inevitable in any struggle which is so multidimensional, cut across the entire sweep of the nation, professions, call it whatever you want. The military itself, the clerical, academic, market, women, factory workers, and so on. So I want you all just to see those of us who are honored as mere representatives of past movement. That really is why narrating this little bit of participation.
How do you assess how far we've come from June 12, 1993, to where we are today, where there's one state that is not under democratic rule? There's question marks around freedom of speech. People are being arrested left, right, and center, although quietly. A number of things that we can list. Have we really moved forward and deepened our democracy since June 12, 1993?
Sometimes one gets to a point where you feel that maybe there is a slave gene embedded in certain sections of humanity. In other words, that some people, some kinds of people, some breed of people feel happier being enslaved.
Wow.
Otherwise, how explain the spread of the staid of military dictatorship just spreading across the West African sub-region to the acclaim of people. I explained the fact that when we had this political tiff here nearly 2 years ago, the first movement of some sections of people go to the military headquarters.
All right, Professor Wole Soyinka, the GCON, who will now be referred as, making that beautiful point about the fact that yes, the list of the honorees for June 12th might not be that exhaustive, but then Nigerians should see them as the representatives of those who are truly deserving of that honor. And of course, that speaks to what should happen next in the following years when such honors will also be conferred, those who have been missed out. But then I thought that Vimbai asked him a very important question, particularly as it pertains to Rivers State and the lack of democracy there. I am not so sure if the good old prof adequately or directly addressed, what Vimbai asked. I heard him speak about, those who enjoy being slaves, military interventions all across West Africa, and then issues about America, etc. But then we are talking about, democracy here. How far have we moved 32 years after June 12th? But again, this is the view of the GCO and Professor Wole Soyinka. Maybe, of course, you'll be 91 next month. So we can show some understanding if we don't quite get the sort of answers that we expect from him once in a while. Adesua, what do you think?
I think brilliant. You're right. Vimbai's questions there were brilliant, and not only what she raised in River State, but also importantly what she said about freedom of speech and people being arrested. Of course, the president has said you can insult me. He's come out to say very emphasizing actually people's freedom of speech and their right to say what they like, even if the politicians they're discussing, all the things they're discussing that people do not like them. But we've seen reports recently, particularly coming out of Akwa Ibom, saying that even journalists are being oppressed. And so these are one of these dividends of democracy that people talk about, the rights of freedom of speech and protection of those freedoms, the freedom of liberty, freedom of movement. These are the dividends of democracy that Nigerians are asking for. And I think so when Vimbai asked that question, I think it was very poignant and it's very, important as well, considering we're honoring a lot of people who had their own freedoms infringed upon during the military rule.
Exactly. I think for me, listening to that media parlay was quite insightful. There's specific things he did, but that's Professor Wole Soyinka mentioned that really stood out for me. One of them being the politicizing of June 12th. And he said, listen, if you were not a part of June 12th, then just leave it alone. It should not be politicized to settle scores or for personal gain. So he spoke against the politicizing of June 12th. Another thing that I would say he did say was dedicating his own national honor to Beko Ransom Kuti. That's a very prominent human rights activist, as well as mentioning certain people who died, whose deaths need and must be investigated. And finally, he did speak about General Ibrahim Babangida's autobiography, A Journey Through Service, and said, well, we might need a second part of that book. I thought that was really interesting. He said, well, there were some important parts of the book that he looked forward to seeing certain details but didn't. So he did say that we might be needing a part 2 of that book. All in all, it was a great conversation that I quite enjoyed. Of course, big ups to Vimbai on that amazing moment and report.
Definitely. Finally, on the week that was, Israel and Iran's air war entered its second week on Friday as European officials sought to draw Tehran back to the negotiating table after President Donald Trump said any decision on potential U.S. involvement would be made within 2 weeks. Israel began attacking Iran 8 days ago, saying it aimed to prevent its longtime enemy from developing nuclear weapons. Iran retaliated with missile and drone strikes on Israel. Tehran maintains that its nuclear program is peaceful. Israel air attacks have killed 639 people in Iran, according to the human rights activist news agency. Those killed include the military's top echelon and nuclear scientists. Israel has said at least 24 Israeli civilians have been killed by Iranian missile strikes, but has targeted nuclear strikes and missile capabilities and sought to shatter the government of the supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, according to Western and regional officials. Countries around the world are taking measures to evacuate their citizens from Israel and Iran as the two nations enter the 7th day of the air war and airspace in the region remains closed. Fires burn and plumes of smoke blow over the residential buildings in southern Israeli city of Beersheba following an Iranian missile strike. Israel, saying Iran was on the verge of developing a nuclear weapon, launched a massive wave of strikes a week ago, triggering an immediate retaliation. Well, we've spoken earlier about Israel and Iran's, missile strikes against each other. Now, over 600 Iranians have been killed already. That is a huge number of people dead. Some of those are military targets, but of course, quite a number of those, majority of those are civilians. And we also saw that Israel has their Iron Dome has been tested by Iran's ballistic missiles. But the truth remains, and I think it is fair to say that if Iran had nuclear weapons, Israel would not be bombing Iran. And I think that is what we're going to see moving forward, if this is going to lead to deterrent or if this is actually going to support the notion that the only deterrent a nation can have in this world order is a nuclear weapon. Of course, we've seen Israel enter Yemen. We've seen Israel have strikes in Beirut, in the suburbs of Beirut in recent years. We've seen Iran also fund terrorism around the world against Israel. But I read the case that Israel submitted to the ICJ, and I think it's quite curious that they have not implied that Iran has control over these rebels like the Houthis, and by doing that, I wonder what the Israeli argument is. Are they starting a new war, or is this an ongoing conflict?
Absolutely, but I mean, the whole world now waits on Trump. I see that on social media, everybody now is talking about, Trump and 2 weeks timeline, Let's see if these 2 weeks will take the world to a pathway towards resolution, or maybe to draw America into the war. And I hope that Trump will just basically, not just from what you said earlier, not just to remember his promise of no more wars, no new wars, but to also remember that history may not necessarily be on the side of America when it comes to jumping into needless wars. So we'll appeal to America, we'll appeal to Israel. I'm not so sure if Israel, you can appeal to Netanyahu. But then this is a needless war. And I do not take any sides here. The Ayatollah is probably as bad as Netanyahu, but let's hope that America will play a dignifying role this time around, so that everybody can go back to drawing board and to the table to discuss how the Middle East can be a lot safer. It's only America that can weigh in on this, and let's hope that Trump, after 2 weeks, will do the needful. Kachi, before we roll out.
Exactly. Well, I mean, you pretty much just said it all. Everyone's looking to Trump right now. We know that the conversations that the Iran foreign minister was having with the U.S. has completely fallen out at this time. They're saying that they're unwilling to pick up on these conversations. However, they do not mind speaking to European diplomats. So there's a lot of issues around this and how it's going to affect the rest of the world as well. So it's very important to not only intervene, but I think the U.S. needs to be very clear as to how they want to do it and the timeline for this intervention as well.
Definitely. And the most fascinating thing about this is that the country in the Middle East with all the nuclear weapons is Israel. But I think that's all we have for you on the week that was.